Yogah Karmasu Kaushalam.
Hello, myself Dr. Bijal Zaveri, Dean, Faculty of Management, Parul University. Just I would like to share my views on managerial leadership disaster. The main point here towards choosing this topic, that managerial leadership disaster, because just I would say that continuity of the previous topic, that is related to how you can create your social media presence, and what is the importance of digital marketing, uh, individual branding, and initial, we can say that, organizational branding. Now when we are dealing with some pandemic situation, I think you might have seen that there are lots of challenges faced by the various organization, because whatever the planning was made before pandemic, that could not be executed in a proper way because of that unfortunate condition, unfortunate situation, uncontrollable factors. And that may be the reason that now we have to give more emphasis towards the coming generation, that how they have to deal with some managerial challenges in the digital world. Managerial leadership disaster, how can be avoided? See the reason behind that, because so many challenges that we are facing during this during this digital world as well. Because see, sometimes every coin has two sides. One is positive, second another side is negative. So when we say that during the pandemic also, you might have observed that the way we are getting the information, sometimes that create some fear factor among the entire mass, and how to address, how to control that negative vibes, negative news. That is the role of the any people in those who are in the top position, or those who are leading the entire world, those who are leading the entire country, those who are leading the entire organization. Because the people role is more powerful during this digital world and communication crisis. So, just I would say about that today's topic about a managerial leadership disaster. First of all, I would like to congratulate this UGC HRDC team to organize this online refresher course for the all professors and academicians, that it will be really helpful to all of them to learn a various upcoming, or we can say that contemporary topic in this, we can say that, uncertainty. So my discussion for this today's session, that is a managerial leadership disaster. How can we avoid it? What is the role? How can we take a certain actions? How we can filter out the certain information? Up to what extent the information is appropriate, and up to what extent that information is reliable? So that all this thing is required, or we can say that all these things are required to able to understand more effectively about the leadership, managerial leadership disaster. So just I would share a few things about that. As our as a heads, as a academicians, our role is that how we train our upcoming generation during this uncertainty. Sometimes which type of information need to be relied, or up to what extent we have to use as a for the credibility purpose. All these things need to be analyzed perfectly, and then after it can be more effective decision can be taken place. Just so I don't want to discuss much more in depth about the disaster, but just a few points that I would like to share about the disaster. That some of the points the some of the events are that is unfortunate events, and as a leader of the organization, as a leader of the country, you have to take so many challenges, you have to take so many steps to overcome a certain failures, to create a more positivity among the entire team. So here we can say that some of the disaster can be controllable, some of the disaster cannot be controllable, cannot be curable, but we can take some preventive measures. So during this session I would like to share a few points about that, what is the role of this leader during this virtual world. Now, during this entire presentation, my focus that is towards the brief about the disaster, then certain types of various types of disasters. What are the types of disaster? Then after we can say that what is the role of organization and leadership in this disaster management. Few of the cases, few of the examples that I would like to share. Then what are the preventive steps and what is the managerial role in disaster management. And the last point about is that what is the crisis management and managerial implication during this virtual world. So just these are the points that I would like to share about on the managerial leadership disaster. So brief discussion on the same. So disaster can be defined as a sudden or greatest misfortune. Just few examples, we can say that before a few years back, I think plague situation, that is a similar of pandemic that was arise, and flood situation in Kerala, then after world war situation, then Ukraine Russia current situation. See, some of the things we can say that some of the things are controllable, but some of the things cannot be controllable. Now in that situation, what type of some steps are required, what type of some we have to find out the some challenges of that problem, what could be the better situation to control that information which is not relevant, or we can say that which is a misguiding. So this is the most important role during this unfortunate event or unfortunate situation. So just I would like to give a more focus initially that about the types of disaster, and some of the disasters can be controllable, some of the disasters cannot be controllable. In some of the situation of man-made disasters, we can take a certain actions, and then after we can find out some appropriate solution in that situation. While in a natural disaster, we can say that which is uncontrollable, but at the same time period, we can take some prevention, we can take, because we can take some measures, and based on that we are able to find out the appropriate decision, appropriate solution in that situation. See, some of the, we can say that disaster, you might have observed that some of the leader during this pandemic also, the leader took certain decision in such a way so that how they can save the people, how they can create some positivity among the entire mass, how this information should be reach out to each and every people. So these are the various innovative steps were taken by leaders of the country, leaders of the organization. Because see, during the pandemic, all healthcare pharmaceutical company took some decision, some multi-speciality hospital took some decision in such a manner so that they can save, the certain problems of the society. At the same time period, how they can create the positivity among the people, how they can create some trust towards the people, that is the most important dimension, right? So just this is a types of disaster, we can say that, and up to what extent we can make some control, but at the same time period, what would be the right decision, what would be the right situation to control that thing. That is the most important way. So just I would like to start about that. What is the role of organization and leaders in the disaster management? See, sometimes how you influence the people to take any decision. See, whenever any leader or any top management professionals, if they take any decision, the first thing that we have to be ready that 80%, 70%, 90% people may be in favor, or 10% people may be in against of that decision. So at the same time period, we can say about that we should be ready with whatever the challenges that we are going to face, and we should come out with some alternative solution for the 10% also, because see, we have to come out with some probable genuine solution for that 10%. I think it would be easier to lead any toughest situation. So we can say that this is the main advantage of whatever the leadership that you are taking, but in a more positive way. How you have created that influence among the people, how you have created that trust among the people, all this dimension also play a very important role. Now, what is the role of organizational leaders during leaders in disaster management? What is the role? See, leaders has a very prominent powerful position in the mind of people, but at the same time period during the crisis situation, how leader can emerge from within a group, what solutions that you are providing, and what type of characteristics that you want to convey. Because see, the quality of that leader is required certain types of prompt decision, the taking some usage of that intelligence power, but at the same time period, how you are creating that personality, how you are creating that aura, so that so that you can create the certain type of unfavorable situation as well. At the same time period, the high energy, that is the most important way. Because see, sometimes if so many things unfavorable situation, and you have to keep your momentum as it is, that is a quite toughest situation. So we can say that that is the role of a leader, that how to survive in any of the tough situations. So we can say that during the disaster situation, that you need, first of all, we need to identify, make some brainstorming discussion is required, but at the same time period, what is the probable solution that is required. At the same time period, during crisis situation, what decision is required to take at local level, as district level, or we can say that at state level. And that is the reason that sudden breakdown or sudden communication break between the leader and the entire mass may create lots of problem. So better, it need to be clarified that what should be the communication technique, what should be the way of messaging, how, and at the same time period, whether that is credible or reliable. That is also important dimension. The reason behind that, if that the reliability is a missing factor, so it may lead to the so many challenges for the organization as well. Because see, at a one stage, sudden breakdown of communication may lead to the ineffective traumatic situation for the organization. So we can say that sometimes during disaster, many of the, we can say that some informal way of getting a messages that may lead to some wrong decision. And sometimes we can say that lack of information and disruption of communication becomes a serious factor to making a decision making. So sometimes you are not aware with the right information, and if you are taking a decision, that is a great loss. Sometimes we can say that certain type of delay to get overcome that situation, or we can say that suppose if any some political power influencing for taking any decision, that may also need to be taken care, that need to be checked out by at the time of taking any decision. So it may be that sometimes the community may feel some insecurity because of so many reasons. So first of all, that insecurity dimension need to be taken care very seriously, because see, if once insecurity is created, then after they may not follow whatever your decision, they may not ready to accept whatever your decision, or sometimes they may create some negativity about so many things. So better to avoid any major disaster also. The role of main leader is that how to remove out the insecurity among the people. See, sometimes we can say that sometime in the some intervention may sometimes hinder the process of relief, but may give political advantage to local leaders. Some of the situation you might have observed that without justification, some decision that may lead to problems in the future. State and national level leadership will try to provide funds and mobilize effective relief within the available resources. At the same time period, the some district level leadership also provide the more relevant information to avoid further any miscommunication. Now my main focus towards this today's session, that how we can take some preventive steps and managerial role. Because see, preventive steps that are most important way that how we can create a more effective managerial decision making. Because during this 2 3 dimensions that also I would like to discuss, that in virtual world also how we can make a more effective way of decision making, that is also a prime part to avoid further any negative outcomes. So just first of all, the first thing is that so sometimes some of the which type of messages, which type of information, which type of communication things need to be used. So we can say that communicate wherever you will be. Any disasters can be avoided by the communication. 80% or 90% of the communication gap may lead to major disaster in the organization. It may related to any related to HR point of view, it may related to any we can say that product point of view. Anything can be sorted out by the communication. Then certain signs and signals are also required in any emergency situation. Then some emergency survival kit is also required. These are the some dimension we can say that some theoretical dimension we can say that how we can overcome a certain situation with the help of taking some helps. Now more focus is that I would like to share about that crisis management, that crisis management and managerial implication. Now in crisis management, in any situation, how we have to avoid the potential damage. Damage in terms of that sometimes some proactive decision is required. You have to take some decision so that better you can avoid some unfavorable situation. At the same time period, some planning and test of that planning in some pilot level is also required. Crisis training and simulation, this type of training need to be provided for both the type of disaster. See, these are the certain things we can make people ready, that in any of the situation you should be ready with a certain type of, we can say that certain pros and cons. Also you should be ready with a certain type of some emergency material. So these are the points we can say that you have to also identify that what is your crisis communication team. See, up to what extent you can rely, up to what extent you have to communicate with that person. Sometimes your decision solution should not be spreaded out in a some different way. So the most important of any leader, that you have to identify that in any of the situation you have to identify that who is your crisis team. If your crisis team is very much confident for you, if you can trust on them blindly, I think you can avoid misfortune, or we can say that unfavorable situations in the future with your crisis communication team. So the my suggestion to all the leaders also, that every person should be ready with the crisis communication team for any type of situation. Then notification and monitoring system, see, nowadays we can say that compared to traditional media and social media, now the employees and stakeholders have so many information. Up to what extent that information should be utilized for the positive purpose, or up to what extent that information can be misused for the some another purpose. So these are the certain dimension, we can say that more appropriate to find out the solution in any tough situation. The fifth point, we can say that the most important is that the communicate. The most important rule of any crisis management for a leader, that it should be communicated more effectively, and at the same time period, if there is a gap, I think that misinformation can be utilized in a different way. So it may lead to further problem. It may lead to the future issues for the other leaders as well. So the most important point over here, that the communication should be more powerful, effective as per the situation. The post crisis analysis, in terms of that, whatever the problem has been occurred, the further effective plan need to be prepared, so that you can use the different types of employees. In a social media, it has provided lots of opportunity also, that you can control any negativity on the various platforms by taking things, simultaneously creating campaign, creating public relation, and creating more effective ways by communicating them. So this is the advantage in a social media, that you can control some negative information as well immediately. See, at the same time period, if you have missed out to communicate with your team, so chances may be that it may lead to create a further disaster. But at the same time period, we can say that if all these things can be planned effectively, that will lead to the more appropriate solution. Now, crisis communication tips, and as a leader of any organization, during what are the virtual leadership strategy, that also I would like to discuss later on. Crisis communication tips, which discuss about the certain points, that the things should be very much transparent, things should be very much prominent. At the same time period, what should be the communicated in a crisis. Some information need to be avoided, and some information need to be used in a more effective way. Sometimes we can say that whatever the incident has happened, what type of problem has created, some diagnosis is required also. Sometimes there is some of the situation where try to avoid comments also. You have to identify the situation where you are there, and based on the situation, try to avoid the certain comments as well. Sometimes be honest, and some real emotions are required to use to communicate things in a more effective way. So, crisis communication, clarify what interview is about. In the media, also, you might have observed that during the pandemic, also, lots of interviews were telecasting on a various platforms. Also, sometimes, if the information is sensitive, better do not make any comments on that sensitive information. At the same time period, try to avoid that much any if dealing with some sensitive information, so try to give your views on that directions. Also provide more positivity. Some live call shows are also nowadays during on various platforms. Some we can say that more focus, goal oriented communication is required to avoid the further problems. So we can say that certain crisis plan throughout the situation. So it requires lots of crisis management through organizational point of view. Then what type of operational point of view you have to take some planning, then some counter disaster, or some, we can say that what could be the future some emergency situation may arise. And the last point, that some post disaster review, some we can say that what is the responsibility, roles and responsibility of the people after the disaster or after the any crisis situation, and what is the appropriate plan for this entire situation. So all this dimension, we can say that, need to be covered more effectively during the crisis plan. Now we can say that virtual and crisis leadership. See, here I would say that if we consider business as usual or customer facing, see, different types of risk are being involved. If business under stress, what are the different types of risk are being involved? The types of risk may be a different, that lead to, we can say that, types of risk, very high risk, or we can say that medium risk or a low risk. But at the same time period, how you deal with that crisis management, resilience. See, one thing that each and individual people, the organization, whether we talk about the organization or country, or we can say that a leader of organization or leader of a country, see, everyone has their own resilience power, and according to that resilience, can that risk can be managed. So up to what extent you are stretching, and up to what extent that you are interpreting this information in a more effective way, I think that will lead to provide more positivity, that will lead to provide more virtual leadership to the unfavorable situation. We can say that leadership in resource organization, community leadership, some leadership attributes and desirabilities. See, during this crisis leadership, during this virtual era also, some different bifurcations are required. Need to identify that what is some emergency management, what is a certain response that is being getting, and what is the continuity that is being managed. So all this dimension need to be taken care very carefully. See, what is a virtual crisis environments? During the virtual crisis leadership environments, must have, or we can say that, executive toolkit. Nowadays we can say that whatever the emergency plan, or we can say that emergency any strategy, can be executed within a certain time duration. Certain e notifications are required, or e activation is required through multi channel. See, multi channel, we can say that there are lots of connectivity can be carried out in this virtual environment. Some e-notifications are required with some credibility dimension. See, when we talk about that informal communication, I think during this crisis management, some informal discussion may play a more negative role, and that will lead to some negativity among the people as well. At the same time period, we can say that effect require a senior e-log keepers to record virtual facts and not perception. See, there is a major differentiation between that what is the fact and what is the perception. If you are collecting views of 10 people, but that is, you are collecting just perception, but you are not sharing the real numbers, you are not sharing the real data. I think based on the perception, if you take a decision, or and based on the real data, if you able to take any decision, you can find out that drastic difference between both the situation. So here most important thing is that virtual fact that play a most important role compared to perception. Then after, we can say that e-monitoring analysis, a continuous monitoring is required in all the platforms, whether the some reactions we are getting response to stakeholders, many to many. See, here we can say that if we are not collecting any views, or we can say that if we are just collecting the perception of the other people instead of taking views of stakeholders, it may also create some problem. So here we can say that e-monitoring system also more important during this some crisis situation. So how you give answers to the different stakeholders, those who are in favor, those who are in against, everyone has their own views, how you take decision, how you interpret that information, all these dimensions are, we can say that, more effective to take any decision. Now, what is the outcome of crisis leadership? We can say that each leadership has their own outcome, each leadership has their own repercussion effect. So, here we can say that crisis leadership through disaster recovery into business continuity and crisis management and business continuity, it means that need to analyze the situation, and based on that some decision is required, some budget allocation, or we can say that what mature business continuity budget. I think at that time period, whatever the financially decision, that also play a very vital role. The virtual crisis leadership path, we can say that connect and communicate, try to connect as many as possible, at least for 15 to 20 minutes, by listening to them, by taking their views, by collecting their views, and out of this entire views, up to what extent you will have to implement that thing for a better decision making. So these are the dimension we can say that about the outcome of crisis leadership. Also, one more thing, releasable information. When we talk about that crisis leadership, we must not forget about that irrelevant information, or we can say that inappropriate information. If we miss out any if we miss out any unrelevant, or we can say that inappropriate information, that may lead to further challenges to the organization. So that indicates that further outcome of crisis leadership can be avoidable with some releasable information. Up to what extent you are making release of that information, up to what extent you are giving the commitment. See, giving the commitment also, that play a more important role, because sometimes the commit, based on whatever the commitment, people would like to give a more trust, people would like to give a more credibility to your decision. So this indicates that during this crisis leadership, management has to think about that all these different dimensions. At the same time period, we can say that some views of a third party, or we can say that those who are really very much important for our decision making, all this dimension need to be also taken care more effective way. To taking any virtual crisis leadership, the three level team need to be created. The first one, that find facts and identify stakeholders. See, first of all, for any crisis situation, you will have to make a team, those who can represent the real facts, those who can represent the right information. Also, identify the stakeholders, those who are really in favor of providing the right information. So, better we can say that the first factual information should be appropriate, and based on that factual information, stakeholders has to take a certain decision. Second one, identify and prioritize tasks and issues. See, the team need to be divided into such a manner that the first team need to provide the real fact, the second team need to provide that what are the issues and which issues need to be sorted out first, which issues need to be give a priority first, because sometimes simultaneously in a crisis situation, if you give a priority or importance to the all issues, you may miss out the important dimensions. So here we can say that during the this critical time, the one team should be in such manner that will give a proper outcome. That is the e5, why it has been mentioned, because see, in the social media, in the digital world, we are overloaded with the too many information. So if too much informations and we don't have that information in a proper filtration manner, it will lead to the major problem to make a challenges to take an appropriate decision. Then the third one, that is the implement and plan strategy, or we can say about that whatever the strategy or whatever the implementation that we are going to make, but that should be in such a strategical way so that we can avoid any type of problem, any type of future outcome of that any unfavorable situation. So hope this virtual leadership need to be make a priority to the three dimension. That is the first one, that what up to what extent that fact is appropriate, whether that is a views or whether that is a real fact, whether that is a real situation or whether that is a, we can say that some different way. So better this allocation of team of task, that will give a better result in any unfavorable situation. And the third one, see, when we want to talk about the implementation plan and strategy, that also will give the idea about that implementation plan and strategy need to be in such a manner so that it should not be with only one or two options available with us, but it should be as per the situation what type of different planning is required. Suppose if the first situation is given and in that situation 90% unfavorable outcome, so better we need to come out with some different plan, right? So this type of execution of plan will give a more appropriate outcome, more appropriate solution in any unfavorable situation. So what are the various steps for the applying the crisis plan throughout the response? When we talk about that crisis plan, or we can say that a certain type of response strategy, what should be the response strategy? So we can say that first situation need to be verified, then after which type of notification is required, whether that notification is with some genuinity or some reliability, then conduct crisis manage assessment, or we can say that create crisis plan, activate crisis plan, also provide some assignments to the organization quickly, try to get some information through that assignments, so you will come to know some information in a more formal way. At the same time period, some prepare information and try to get some approval for that for that various situation. Also release information through pre and arrange channels. In the digital era also we are having so many options available, but at the same time period, what will be the appropriate channel need to be utilized to release the information? If the information is released with a inappropriate channel, that may lead to further disaster in the situation. So better when we want to talk about that certain different types of channels that leads to situation where we have to come out with some proper solution. The next step, that is, we can say that some feedback and crisis evaluation. So feedback in any situation, feedback should be created, should be collected at all level, not only at one point but at a 360 degree. That feedback is required to collect. At the same time period, we need to give more focus towards the certain taking evaluation in a more effective way. When we want to talk about that some effective evaluation, it means that effective outcome is also required. What type of responses are being generated, and what would be the appropriate solution in that unfavorable situation, right? So conduct public education. Some awareness sessions are required in a crisis situation. We need to educate them. We need to make a proper planning, not only at a small level but at a different level, at a local level, at a national level, at a state level. So that requires a public education, whether up to what extent that seriousness with this information, up to what extent this may create harmful situation. And the last point, that is about the monitoring of the events. So monitoring of the events, it means that finally whatever the plans are being prepared, whether that plans as per the our all the pros and cons, or whether the some more modifications are required by taking regular observations towards that situation. So this indicates that applying the crisis plan throughout the response. So virtual crisis management and environments. So 3 4 points that is most important during the digital era, that essential information and communication for emergency command, that should be updated IT support to get information in a more effective way, in an emergency way. Guaranteed voice communication through layered redundancy at all levels, including satellite communication and training in technology. Because see, it requires a lots of training to get information in a more we can say that a formal way. Also, the information should not be created in such a manner so that the entire situations may be more troublesome. Shared Excel logs at all level of management, report templates, HR and stakeholders tracking through an internal IT drive. The information should be passed on to each and every people using of the cloud technology. Apply a read down protocol so that subordinate team cannot view a higher team log unless permission is granted. Some information should be said in such a manner so that that can be utilized in a more effective way, in a more appropriate way. At the same time period, guaranteed fallback movement of data, especially the Excel log, through layered redundancy and having an additional internet service provider. See, here we can say that more IT support system is required in any crisis situation, in a crisis management. We should prepare our leaders in such a manner so that they cannot face any anxiety because of that any technology. Sometimes the person should be that much cool and calm to manage all this troublesome situation. Constant updating of individual with the telephone numbers, then some conference breach numbers, group SMS, individual email addresses and group email. Use of social media for all back communication is a disaster in a disaster situation. See how you immediate spread out the information in a fraction of second. Physical information display in a digital war rooms. Then collaboration requires manager with hotspot device so that workflow commences from notification and continue from anywhere in the world. It means that people should be ready with excessive training. So during all this point, you might have observed that more emphasis are required to train the people with the IT system, so that can further any problems could be avoided. Essential information management for crisis leadership. So here just I would like to share a few points regarding that. What are the essential information need to be handled carefully. Ineffective management procedures for critical information requirement include failure to post or display them in a conspicuous and timely manner, failure to update them once answered, and then failure of decision makers to recognize when information requirements have been answered. See, sometimes situations are unfavorable, sometimes situations may not be positive for you. So instead of giving answer one time, not giving answer on the another time, it may lead to lots of miscommunication to the stakeholders. So better up to what extent the information, the messages need to be passed on. E-log keepers must be frequently practiced in their ability to record management interaction with multiple stakeholders simultaneously. Nowadays, as rightly said, too much informations at from the various places, but up to what extent, which information need to be filtered out and need to be utilized for more effective way. At the same time period, all stakeholders are that much important in the organization, so need to be taken care, views from all the multiple stakeholders, but at the same time period, up to what extent need to take decision, up to what extent need to take priority, up to what extent need to take some decision in the unfavorable condition. So all these are the essential information during the crisis leadership. Then e-log keepers must use a practice format so that they can multitask, that is listen or read multiple virtual conversation, screen, prioritize and record the critical information. So see, during the digital era, too many information, but the person that you have taken at the e-log keepers, that use that need to be trained in such a way so that multiple format need to be used to gain the information. Instead of taking the information from the one point of view, the information can be taken care, can be collected from the multiple point of view, and that virtual conversation can be make more effective to whatever the information that has been recorded, can be come out with a more appropriate, or we can say that effective way. The last point, then after that, e-log keepers must understand the decision making and problem solving process and how to optimize information tool for information capture and transfer when experiencing information overload. So when we talk about that, certain types of situation where problem solving process, whether we have to take a decision making in a problem solving, or we can say that up to what extent that information can be captured and transferred to avoid the overload of information, right? So these are the various points which requires a lots of regular ways, that how we can overcome the information, how we can overcome the certain unfavorable situation, up to what extent some training is required, up to what extent certain different templates need to be ready, up to what extent a certain type of training need to be given to record the multiple information simultaneously in the digital era. So the last point about the overall requirement for direction and management, certain requirement that some management during both non-disaster times and during a disaster itself. This usually consists of national as well as national disaster council and disaster committee. At the same time period, some resource organization where some policy decision is required, some relevant management arrangement is required so that we can avoid a certain unfavorable situation. So last but not least, just overview this diagram, which requires to be noted or taken carefully, that if we are dealing with any unfavorable situation, or we can say that if we are going to make a ready of team in a more effective way, I think these are the 4 5 last slides gives a more important dimension, that how you prepare your team, how you prioritize your tasks and issues, up to what extent issues that you are covering, and up to what extent you are issues that you are removing out, and the last one, that what are the different plans that you are having availability of that plans and executions of plan. Sometimes the plans may be available, but the executions may give a lots of challenges. So here we can say that this is the most important dimension. Then these are the some planning steps from starting identifying the situation to make some monitoring of the events, and in between also, throughout any steps, any type of problems have been identified. Suppose if you have identified any problems, in between you can take your decision and you can come out with a more appropriate solution. I think this is most important. I just am recovering, recollecting all the points, because this 4 5 slides, last slides, are more important, because about that IT system in a social media platform, in a digital world. Because see, support, if we are having a support of IT system, but our humans are not being trained for that with that system, so that may lead to further the challenges to the situation. So better, the more emphasis should be given towards that, how we can train the entire thing, how we keep ready all these things on our finger points, so that we can save our time. And the last one, that is about that, I think this is the most important thing, about that, how you train your e-log keeper team. I think this is the most important team, where the reason behind that, whatever the informations that will be provided to you, based on that informations, you are, as a manager, as a leader, you are going to take some decision. So overall, we can say that the most important dimension, that how you are prioritizing your issues, how you are taking the task, how you are collecting the information in a more appropriate way, and based on that information, how you are taking some decision. And the last point, that just I would like to share, that about the virtual crisis leadership, which requires a lots of alertness before taking any decision. Because see, if your one may right decision may flourishing the future of so many people, but if any one wrong decision may lead to spoil the future of so many upcoming generation. So, and that is the right example, that I think still Hiroshima and Nagasaki, whatever the during that time period, what people face, still that generation are also facing the certain problems at this stage as well. So as a leader of organization, as a leader of a country, as a leader of any institution, the role of that leader should be so powerful, so that it can flourish the future of so many upcoming generation. So this is a brief overview about the entire managerial leadership disaster. It can create an opportunity or it may spoil the future, but it depends in the hands of the one people, one person. So better, I think, based on this entire session, how I would like to connect both the sessions, that in previous sessions that more emphasis were given toward that to create your brand in the digital platform. That will not help out in a, we can say that, just at individual level, but as an institutional level, and as an institutional level, and now as a leader, as a main, we can say that the influencer people, how we have to take care of all this challenging situation in a digital world. That is also important dimension. So thank you so much for this giving opportunity to share my views on this managerial leadership disaster. Thank you so much once again.